Adoption and expensive. Two words that do not always belong together. There are 120,000 children in the United States that are waiting for a forever family, and adopting through this option is extremely affordable. I'm Marcy Bursack, an adoptive mom of a sibling pair, and also the author of The Forgotten Adoption Option. Twice monthly, I will interview people like adoptive parents and adopted children who have been touched by foster care adoption. My goal is to find more forever families and increase awareness about foster care adoption, because if it were you or me, we would want someone to do this for us. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. This episode is a story that is not uncommon, but often gets unheard. You're going to hear from a young woman who was dropped off at a group home when she was 10 years old. She navigated the rest of her school years without a permanent family. Thanks to some wonderful algorithm on Instagram, she found my podcast and reached out. Her words were, "I love what you're doing. I want to tell you my story if you want to hear it." Hi, Melody.
Hi.
Of course, I wanted to hear her story, and we talked in Instagram chat and over the phone for the next few days. As I'm hearing from people privately about their personal foster care journeys, I'm learning that often those who've been touched by foster care and adoption know they have a story to tell, but they are unsure how to tell it. So insert this conversation. By taking the time to hear about the experience Melody had with the foster care system, light can be shed on the tremendous need we have in our country for stable, loving homes for the 120,000 children who are in foster care and available to be adopted today. And before we dive into Melody's story, something Melanie and I were talking about kind of behind the scenes where we got started tonight was about the importance of knowing whose story we're telling. And I was sharing with Melody that I'd recently gotten a review on Goodreads from a reader who said, I got this book and it was a how-to guide. This person didn't really tell me her story, her family's story. And I was sharing with Melody that in some ways I was like, well, the subtitle of my book says it's a how-to guide. So like I delivered what I said I was going to do. But at the same time, what I recognize is that I think this reader was wanting to know my kid's story. And one thing that I have come to recognize is that the things my kids went through and their version of their story is first person for them. It's not first person for me. So I say all of that because tonight Melody's going to share her story, and it's not mine to share. And she's going to share what she's comfortable with. It's her story to share, and she's choosing to share what she shares. So I just kind of wanted to put that as the backdrop as you hear from someone who was in foster care but never adopted. So Melody, will you tell us how old were you when you went into foster care?
I was 10 years old.
And you got dropped off at a group home. So was it like a social worker that brought you there?
It actually, it was my aunt that brought me to the group home. I think the goal was to try to hide me from DHR so that they could eventually come back to get me, but they never were able to come back to get me from the group home.
And at the time before you went to the group home, who were you living with?
I was living temporarily with my aunt.
Wow. So you were dropped off kind of thinking that eventually they would come back.
Yes, that was always the understanding.
Wow. And so from what you shared with me before this recording is that you had some positive and some not so positive experiences with foster parents. And I'm wondering if you could say something to people who would be great foster or adoptive parents to encourage them to begin the process to help a child. What would you say to them?
I think so many families think that they need to have the perfect family in order to accept a child in. Like, there's so many people who think, if we had more money, then we could adopt a child, or, if my job had better hours, or, if I was more emotionally capable of dealing with that, then maybe I could be a really good adoptive or foster parent. And I think a lot of those people think that there are just tons of couples out there that are these perfect parents. In reality, there are none. Every single adoptive family is just as normal as any other family, and everybody has their quirks and their personality clashes. Whether you're biologically related to your parents or not, there's going to be personality clashes. You don't have to be completely 100% prepared for your child to enter your home. Um, and I think a lot of people truly believe that there's this really long waiting list of these these parents who want to have a child. um, and the sad reality of that is there are a lot of people who are on a waiting list for a baby. There's a lot of people who are on a waiting list for a child that has never lived with their biological family, but there is a really long waiting list of children in foster care that need a home. So there is no long, there's not a whole bunch of people that will be better suited. I think if you feel like, if you can recognize, um, if you can love a child, if you know that you can love a child, whether it be biological or not biological, I think that you would be a great foster parent.
Melody, you're reminding me of a few episodes back. I had a friend, Robin, on, and Robin was a married, no kids family. And through being in the same church, through like a small group, she met her now daughter. And one of the things Robin shared in the episode is that her daughter went to like a group setting for the summer as her and her husband were deciding if they wanted to pursue and become her family and that kind of thing. And when she went to pick up her daughter, she shared that she was like in a girls' home, that there were girls upon girls upon girls in line asking if they could come home with her. And you're completely right. And it's a stark difference, right? That there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids in our country in a long line that are just saying, hello, I'd like to have a family. So I appreciate you shedding light on that. And Melody, I don't know if you were intending to share any of this. I'm just going to ask, and I can cut this out if you don't want it. But do you want to talk at all about like what happened for you during ages like 10, like during your growing up years in this group home? Do you have any things you want to share with the listeners?
Um, I, I can. I think that, um, well, first of all, I was, before I was with the family I have now, I was with a family who probably should not have been foster parents, because I think that they were foster parents. I think they had this in their mind that this was a temporary thing, and they did certain things that were extremely damaging to all of the foster children in their house. Things like they had a separate Christmas tree for them and their biological children, and then they had the tree that was for everybody else. And they
That's
made a
so
very
sad.
yeah. Um, so I mean, there was just so many things like that that was like, constant reminder that you are not our biological child. We have, as my husband says, he he really does a good job of looking at, what I've been through and putting words to it. But he said a lot of people have been in your life, but there's not really been anybody that's had skin in the game.
Ooh.
At any point in time, if it got uncomfortable, they could back out. And that was the reality, um, until I got the family that I have now. So the family that I have now, they were my foster family. They were my house parents, at the group home where I grew up. And they completely had to undo all of the damage that was done from a prior foster family. And they had to deal with a whole lot of, um, emotional trauma and inability to communicate that happened after living in such a toxic environment. So I feel like that's the experience for most people in a group home, because it's so valuable to have a family that's yours. Like you are going to be in our family for the rest of your life. When you grow up and you know that the people who are raising you the moment you turn 18, they're going to completely leave you. Um, it makes you grow up a whole different way than if you had the security of knowing that your family was going to be there for you.
Because it's more of a temporary view. Like, I'm your parent until this, as opposed to I'm your parent for life. I'm your family for life.
Yes.
It's good that your husband is able to help kind of put words to things, because so many times in our lives, right? If we can just know what to call it, it helps us better digest it and know what we went through. And so for you then, Melody, was a lot of the untangling related to this like first foster family experience, or did you also have like trauma from the situation with your biological family?
Um, I think, I really don't want to speak poorly of my biological mother. Um, One thing that I tell a lot of former foster children, um, that can help you really, really heal and understand the situation from your biological family, is something that my current foster mom, and I'll go ahead and share her name, Christy Gum. Um, it's something that she shared with me when I was a teenager that helped me figure out how to love my biological mom
Mm.
in a less confusing way. So, the phrase that my mom uses is, you can't get pizza at McDonald's. And
That's
yeah,
cute.
yeah. It applies to so many different things and so many different people, but for foster children or children who have been adopted, um, it's so important to understand that, because not only can you not get pizza at McDonald's, but you still need pizza, and it's okay to need pizza. So when I figured that out, can you kind of connect the dots there? Let me kind of explain that just for the podcast listeners. So um, not getting pizza at McDonald's means that my biological family was McDonald's and I needed pizza. They did not have what I needed. They could not offer what I needed. As much as I begged them for a stable home, um, or for, everything to work out to where I could go home and live with them, that just wasn't what they could offer. Um, so at first I thought maybe I shouldn't need pizza. Maybe I should just need cheeseburgers, because that's what my biological family has to offer. And so I didn't let my foster family in to give me the things that I needed. And I kept looking for my biological family to give me the what a normal family would give, the encouragement, support, that a normal mom would give. And she wasn't capable of doing that, and that's okay. Um, but my foster family was. They were there for me. They were there to be there at my basketball games or piano recitals when my mom was not able to be there. They were there to give me the pizza that I needed.
That's such a powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
Because and the other piece of it that came to mind for me is that, if you're expecting to get pizza at McDonald's, you're going to be really disappointed. Now, there are
Yeah.
things like the KFC and Taco Bell where you can like kind of mix match the menu, right? But in the reality of what you shared with that metaphor, it's you have to really let go of the expectation that you're going to get anything besides burger and fries or chicken nuggets from McDonald's, because that's what they sell and that's what they have.
Hmm.
That's so good. That's so good. And so, Melody, I feel like sometimes the listeners are in my head because I'm like, I think somebody's thinking, okay, wait a minute. You said she wasn't adopted, but she just said mom, and it was about someone that she's currently in relationship with. So, can you kind of connect the dots for our listeners on how that all works?
Sure. So again, like, you can't get pizza at McDonald's, but I still needed pizza. And so I remember praying, Lord, I have these needs as a human being, as a child, as someone who's growing up, and I don't have them met. So please just bring people in my life to meet these needs. And so I had my, what I call my godmother. So you've talked about this in your book, actually. We called them resource parents, but you had another name for them. It's where your foster parents get a break.
Oh, respite.
Respite, yes. So
Respite
my
providers. Yeah.
respite parents, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, they have continued a relationship with me into my adulthood, which is really cool.
Right. So which is why and you're also calling them your godparents?
Yeah, so I call them my godparents just because I don't think everybody knows what a resource parent or a respite parent
Right.
is. So if I call them my godparents, it's like socially understood, and I don't have to explain anything.
That's really clever. And that makes sense, right, too, because I remember similarly when my kids were in preschool that eventually, like, they went from calling my husband and me by our first names to calling us mom and dad, but then it became this question, like, interacting socially of like, "Oh, these are your kids," or "We didn't know you had kids," and so, yeah, you have to kinda develop this language just so
Yeah,
you can kinda, like, duck the radar and not feel like you stick out.
exactly. Yeah, so I've just had this skill over the years that when I have a need, I recognize that it's a need, and I normally will pray or, look at the people around me and think, could any of these people that are in my life meet this need for me right now? And so I have my respite parents, I have my house parents, um, I have people who were at my church. I had a mentor when I first went to college. Her name was Justine, and she met so many of my needs at that time. So I was never lacking for someone who was willing to meet a need that a parent would normally fill.
Mm. I love that you could, like, identify what it was, pray through it, and then you would find it. I love that because that's and exactly to your words of like you needed a parent, you needed an adult there for something that you couldn't provide as a child, and you found it at time and time again. And one of the things that you had shared with me when we were chatting was this big gap in the space of transportation for foster youth. Can you kind of shed some light on that?
Sure. So um, throughout my college experience, I really struggled financially, and I struggled. I worked multiple jobs, and I mean, I stayed up really late at night studying, and I had a lot of resentment towards my fellow college students that were able to not have a job because their parents were helping them pay rent, or they were able to have health insurance. Um, or their parents could co-sign with them on a car or a lease or any of those things. So I learned pretty quickly that not having credit as a 19-year-old is a recipe for homelessness.
Mm,
Um,
ouch.
yes. So, I mean, I, was raised to, not do credit cards. They talked about how, they're a trap and all this kind of stuff. And so I never really established credit. And I think some really well meaning people, um, I mean, I went through so many different financial counseling courses and everything, but I think I just got really frustrated when I realized there's only so much that financial counseling can help with. If I can't sign a lease, I can't pay rent.
So
If I
what'd you do?
Yeah, so um I mean, just over the years, I was just vocal about my needs to the people around me. I let people know, like, I don't have a way to get to the doctor. I don't have a way to, or I would go to apply for jobs nearby, and they would ask, "Do you have reliable transportation?" And I was like, "Well, actually, I don't." And they wouldn't give me a job. And I was like, "But I
Oh.
could walk here. I could walk." And they were like, "It doesn't matter. We really don't like to hire people who don't have a car." So, um, I had a car, but it was actually a 1984 Chrysler LeBaron convertible that the group home let me buy for $200. Somebody
Aw.
donated, yeah, somebody had donated this beautiful classic convertible to the group home, and they let me buy it for a very discounted price. And so that's what I took with me to college. And I was so thankful for that vehicle. But I was actually, and this is the craziest thing, I was parked at a friend's house and a driver's ed teacher backed into my car.
Oh, that is very crazy. Like, of all
Yeah,
people, that would not be top of the list.
no. So, I mean, I was, when it first happened, I thought everything was gonna be okay, but then they said that it was totaled. And when it was totaled, that car was only worth $1,800. So when I went to go look for another car, there was nothing. Even with that money, nobody would let me nobody would let me sign on for a car loan because I didn't have any credit. So I was back
Right.
with no transportation. I lost my job. And then again, the group home allowed me to buy another car from them. They had a work truck. And again, they let me buy from them because they were like, you know what, we really wanted to help you through college, and this was the way that we were going to do it. But we see that you lost your car through no fault of your own, and we really want to continue to help you. So here's this other truck that we have, and you can buy this one for about the same price. It was like $200, I think, as well, maybe 250. And so I had that car, um, and then I got into a wreck about. It was not even a year later. I got into a wreck, and it was fine. Like, it was able to be driven, but they told me since it was leaking some fluid that they were going to tow it. And so they towed it. And then I went back to go get it with my house parents the next day. Or actually, it was a couple of days later because it happened over the weekend. And they told me that I needed to pay $200 to get it out, and I didn't have the money.
Oh,
And so they told me to come back when I did have the money, and I was supposed to get a paycheck a few days later. And I got the paycheck and went back, and then I owed $700.
that's terrible. They just like compounded a fee on you?
Yeah, every day that it was there, I think it was like $100 more. So I had to abandon my car.
Melody, that's terrible.
Yeah, so I was back again with I have no way to get to work. Lost the job that I had again, and so I remember being so frustrated because I mean, I tried so hard. They told like I grew up around a bunch of people that were like, if you just pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, if you just work really hard, things will work out for you. And I was realizing as time went along that there's just not systems in place for people who age out of foster care where that's true.
It's like the cards are almost stacked against you.
It felt like that most days. I tried, and my house parents did a really good job of keeping me positive and helping me to see the hope that I had for the future, and just reminding me that everything was going to be okay. Um, but it really felt like that the majority of the time.
That you kind of get to a point of stability and then something would fall.
Right. Um, and so then I got to my internship, and I had at that point I worked at summer camp and saved up um, every summer. I saved basically every cent that I made at summer camp. It was the only job I could get that didn't require transportation or um, having to pay rent. I just moved my stuff into a storage unit, and then I worked at summer camp, and they paid for my food and my housing, and I got $200 a week and just saved all of it for a few summers, and then bought another car. And I needed this car to get me to grad school, to my dietetic internship, which is extremely competitive. It's only a 50% acceptance rate anyway. And I needed transportation to get to all the different preceptors because they were all over the state. So, so I bought this car, and I was really excited that I had saved up and bought a car off Facebook Marketplace. But it was a cheap car. It kept breaking down. I kept on throwing all of my money at it, trying to keep it running. And eventually, on the first day of my clinical rotations in my master's program, it broke down in front of UAB, and I just didn't know what to do. I went to my dietetic internship director and told her, I don't have transportation to get the to my preceptors. Is there any kind of student help, something that could provide transportation? And she just said no. And so it was looking like I was going to have to drop out of this program. I was so close to being done. I was so close to finishing this program and being financially stable. And so I actually had my Christy Gumb's brother, Scott Langford. He called me and he said, I think you're doing a great thing. How much could you afford every month? And I just dropped to the floor. I was like, are you serious? Because I knew at that moment that he was going to co-sign with me on a car. And
Wow.
it was just so amazing. And they all, everyone in my house parents' families all pooled together to give me a little bit of funds to help pay for car insurance. And then he co-signed with me on a car, and it started my credit. And after that, it was after I had credit, I could sign my own lease. And so I was finally free from couch surfing and from just being afraid that I was going to end up homeless.
Melody, there's so many pieces in what you just shared because I'm thinking, okay, one thing that stuck out to me was that you saved your money from summer camp and you said for 2 summers and bought a car. Like
Yeah.
that takes a lot of waiting and a lot of like keeping your eye on the goal and not spending it and like that there's so much there about how you worked so hard and yet every time you get a car something would fall out, right? Like it wasn't stable. And at the same time, I would love if you could shed some light because you kind of gave us a little teaser. So you went to graduate school to become a dietitian
Yes.
and you said UAB. So that's University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Yes.
And so people are going, wait a minute, you're like highly educated in a very untraditional background. You're getting help from these amazing, caring adults who aren't biologically related to you. You're having to overcome all of these other parts of college life besides the studying and besides the like juggling a job and school. Like you're having to deal with all these other barriers. And so I know you had shared with me as a result of your own struggle challenge with transportation, you're wanting to do something about that. What do you want to do to help fix the transportation need for foster youth?
Yes. So, um, I mean, I looked at everything. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing something that had already been done. So I looked to see if there was any kind of transportation help for children in foster care, and there are a few. But and ultimately, like I was talking to people, and they were like, there are homes for these kids when they age out, and I was like, oh really? So I looked it up, and I was like, uh, there are 700 beds for children aging out of foster care in Florida, but there are 8,000 children who are aging out every year. So there's a huge gap. And just
Wow.
because some things are being done, the programs that are in place are not, um, they can't hold all of the children that are aging out. There's so many of them. And so we really need more help. And so I thought of, what was the thing that gave me the most independence, and what was the thing that really made the difference for me? And it was truly transportation, the ability to get to work so I can make my own money. Having Not having a car payment allowed me to pay for things like food and other necessities. It's just so impossible to pay for everything as a college student trying to better yourself, or if you're in a technical program trying to, develop a skill to better yourself. There's no way that you can make the money necessary to support yourself. um, Currently, our the way that our economy is it kind of requires young adults to depend on their parents initially before they can develop a skill and then join the workforce. What's happening is these children who are aging out of foster care, um, they are met with all of these socioeconomic challenges that prevent them from doing something about it, getting out of poverty, not repeating the cycle, and they end up homeless, and they end up having children that go back into foster care. Um, there's so many crazy statistics. You can look them up, but um, and I truly believe that it's not their fault. I think it's just this socioeconomic environment that we live in that's creating this problem. So I want to start a ministry where we provide transportation to former foster children. And so the way that I would like that to work is if a child is already on their way to school, if they're on their way to technical school, if they're on their way to college, and they're doing good things, um, I want to help that child make it. I want to give them the support that they need, the boost to make it possible, and provide them with the car. So I want to give it as a scholarship to college seniors who are or not college, high school seniors that are aging out of the system. and have them apply for it as if it was a scholarship. And then, depending on how many cars are donated or how much money we raise to purchase vehicles, we want to be able to give those vehicles to those children that are on their way to do great things.
Just like you had been given that gift.
Exactly.
You want to pay it forward in the same way.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. Melody, what I think is interesting as part of where you and I get to meet in life is that you finished school, you got your master's, you got married last December. You're so passionate about your own story and seeing how you can use that to help others. And I'm really curious, just because you're someone who is newly married, at what point in your relationship with your husband, your now husband, when did you tell him that you were in foster care?
Um, that's actually really funny because I had been going on different dates, and I just discovered over time that if I withheld that information for too long and then dropped it on them like a bomb, a lot of times that didn't go very well. Like, I had a few guys that were interested in me, but then when I told them I was in foster care, they assumed, oh, she must have like problems. She must have baggage, or she must, have all of these things that are not going to be healthy. And so I was like, I think it needs to be said like from the get go. So,
Mm.
so my husband met me, um, or, he was just a guy at the time, but he met me at the library while I was studying for the dietitian exam. And it was the first conversation we had. I said, one thing you should know about me is that my parents are not my biological parents. If I'm talking about my parents, then I'm talking about my house parents, because I grew up in a group home. And he took it so well.
Do you remember what his reaction was?
He was just so sincere, and um and he didn't I thought that he was going to be turned off by it or scared away by it, but he acted like I was just telling him, you know, a super basic fact about myself.
Sure, like I have this many siblings and I have blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, like just, yeah, that's beautiful. Melody, I think what you have done in this conversation has created a lot of questions and a lot of ahas, and you've shed light on things that I think many people are not because they intended to be, but I think many of us, myself included, were just oblivious to the challenges that foster youth face, oblivious to the nuances of how do you navigate life when your biological family is not there. And I'm so grateful that you reached out and that you were vulnerable to share pieces of your story with us. And as I have learned recently, it adopting and getting involved in the foster care system as a caregiver is not something that people hear about once and they're like, I'm going to go do it, because there's so many pieces to that. I've learned recently that when a couple, if it's primarily the woman, if it's a heterosexual relationship, when she says, I think we should do this, 7% of the time her significant other says no, and then it never goes anywhere, and so that family never pursues helping in the foster care system. And then on the other side of it, sometimes it's just not the right time for people to get involved, and that might be because they're younger or because they have some goal they're working on or whatever the thing is. And what I love about being able to share your story, Melody, is that you're planting a seed, and you're planting a seed for people that may have already kind of been thinking about it or may totally know they want to do it. And so I really appreciate your heart, and I just appreciate your ability to articulate your story and share that with people you may never meet. So thank you for being on my show.
Yeah, and this was really good. I'm normally so private about these things, but this has been, a time of growth for me to be able to talk about these things, to know that my story is bigger than myself.
It is. And you're helping people you may never meet be able to find their forever family. And I think that's so precious.
Yes. If you do your job well, Marcy, then my job will be insignificant.
Well, I love that I got to have you on. This was a
Yeah.
treasure.
Hmm. For sure.
As a listener of the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast, you are helping raise awareness about foster care adoption and the 120,000 children who are waiting for a forever family. You can also help raise awareness by leaving a review, subscribing, sharing, talking about, and liking this podcast. If you'd like more information on adopting a child or sibling set through the foster care system, visit my website, ForgottenAdoptionOption.com. There you will find out how to get started, and you can even order a copy of my book, The Forgotten Adoption Option, which will guide you through the entire process, and it is available in paperback, audio, and ebook. I welcome you to reach out with questions, comments, and your own story. I would love to hear if you're signing up for training or where you are in the adoption process. You can connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for Marcy Bursack. Thank you for tuning in, caring, and sharing, because every child deserves a family.